Welcome, everybody. Wow, this is a full house. Thank you all for being here. So welcome to the Alumni Leadership Conference. My name's Hyana Park. I'm in the class of 83, and also I got a Master of City Planning class in 85. And this year, I'm serving as your Alumni Association President. I'm excited to be here like you with fellow MIT alumni and volunteers. Like me, you have all returned to campus this weekend because we share a passion for how MIT is making a better world, not only for us, but for the generations to come. Over the next 2 days, we'll have the opportunity to connect with one another, with current students, current faculty, and the staff of the Alumni Association and Resource Development. I know you'll be inspired to continue to engage in the important work you do as a volunteer for MIT. By the end of the conference, it's my hope that you'll feel energized, excited, and even more motivated than you are now. Maybe that's hard, but we hope to, as I think someone says, all of us who went to MIT, we're constantly striving to do better always. So I also encourage you to take what you learn here and share the stories of MIT when you return home. And you're gonna hear amazing stories. I mean, every day, I'm here a lot. I get chills when I hear what MIT is doing to impact the world around us and the hope we have for a better future. Beyond that, I hope you'll write down a few new things that you yourself can do to advance the mission of MIT. Because I think we also know if we don't personally do something, it's hard to change others and influence others. So whether that's inviting a friend to get involved by coming to an event, or making an annual fun gift, or by sharing how MIT makes a difference in the world with prospective students or friends of the Institute. I hope you've already downloaded the MIT Alumni Events app from Guidebooks. How many in the room have done that? Wow, fantastic. So if you haven't, go to the App Store in the Apple products or Google Play to download it now. And you know, we have the free Wi-Fi here at MIT. It's truly the best way to make connections with your fellow attendees, get alerts and updates, and manage your own conference schedule. If you need help, please see one of the staff in the registration area or any of the events that you're going to. You may have noticed that you received a ALC passport. It's this, did you notice this? Okay, in your welcome bag. That's for you to take with you to every of your sessions. So when you go, you want to get your passport stamped, and if you have all your stamps at the end, the final event at the LIST Visual Arts Center tomorrow, you'll bring your completed passport, and anyone who has that gets this cute little beaver, all right? So whether the beaver's for yourself to cuddle in the evening or for your children or for your grandchildren, I think this is something you can definitely strive for. All right. So we're delighted to start ALC today with a fellow MIT alumnus and an institute leader. Israel Ruiz became the executive vice president and treasurer at MIT in October 2011. As the Institute's chief financial officer, Israel is responsible for financial and debt strategy development, budget and capital planning, and the integrity of our financial information. He's born in Barcelona. Israel holds a master's degree from the MIT Sloan School of Management and a degree in industrial and mechanical engineering from the Polytechnic University of Catalonia. Please help me welcome MIT Executive Vice President and Treasurer Israel Ruiz.
Well, before we get started, what you were not reminded is this is actually a renewal of your degree. And the first test, I think, for those of you who made it this morning, you've passed, which is I wake up every morning making as hard as possible, if you remember how to go from point A to B on campus, to change that. So if you made it here, you find a way. The second thing before we get started that I wanted to really make sure that we acknowledge is we have friends and families down in the South, in Texas, in Florida, and others. And I know I've seen a few of you who live in that area, and I really want to make sure that we acknowledge those who suffered the two climate events and weather events that we here at MIT worry as much as you do, but it's really hard to see. And personally, it affects me quite a bit. So welcome if you made it from there, and best wishes for the people who are there. So let me start with the theme of today, enabling breakthrough innovation. And I wanted to touch upon several factors that have to do with that. The first one is, and being the treasurer at MIT, is financial. The second one will be the physical environment, and the third one will be the kinds of programs and activities that we make to really make that a reality. But let me start with first principles and my job, which is the numbers, and tell you that on June 30, we close the fiscal year. We report to the October meeting of the corporation, the annual meeting. That report, a week ago, we just issued it. I just remind people, if you want to compare us to our peers, you have to wait until January, because that's how long it takes for them to issue it. So I don't know how they did, but we did pretty good. We had a great position. We had great returns on investment. We had great campaign numbers and overall performance. But not only that, but we actually got started with lots of things that are meaningful to the topic of today of enabling more innovation from MIT and the MIT community. So how do I measure some of these things? And of course, I'm not going to go into the financials. This is not an investor's day. One key metric for MIT is the resources we have, net assets. Most of those are financial through the endowment and other investment pools. Some of them are the buildings and other kinds of things we have on campus. But for the most part, what you can see in this chart is the recovery from 2009 and how nice it has been. And the main two drivers of this recovery have been the campaign and the investment returns. So we're kind of shy of 20 billion. We've never been here. Just to put numbers in perspective, in 2000 to 2001, MIT's net assets were around 6 billion. So from 2000 to 2008, they kind of doubled, and the rest were going forward. Why is this important? Well, it's important because it creates the basis for how we invest into the future of MIT, which at the end of the day is what we will be talking about today. The second part is the historical reality of, from a performance on an operating basis, MIT was always challenged, and it was challenged because of its model after World War II. And I've talked a lot about, and I'll show you the numbers, it was fully funded by research, and research only pays you after you've done the work, and in most of the times, in fact, now all of the times, it pays you less than $1 that you spent. So it's not a great business to be in. And in fact, from a financial perspective, we had to barely sustain that kind of performance. And it was not until we had the resources and investment and others to really be able to put the investment necessary to do the research we need to do independently of how the funding sources go and kind of measure that. So we've sustained this, and the results for the last 10 years, it's the first period of MIT that has had positive results on an operating basis. For some of you who have seen me present this a few times, in 2007, I became vice president for finance, and it was negative. So in 10 years, we've been able to really turn around how we run MIT and how we make sure that the resources are allocated to the biggest and most important priorities that Rafael and the rest of the faculty will lead. How does this all translate? Well, it translates to say, well, is it sufficient to have the billions of dollars that I showed you in net assets? And the answer is always no, right? The ambition of MIT, the ambition of the faculty of MIT, the community, the staff, the students, is always outpacing the resources we have. But one way that we really think about how we, the ratio of investment to how we do it is this metric, which really is the net assets divided by the operating budget. How sizable is that operating budget at MIT? And it took, I've been saying this many times now, from 1910 to 1960 to go from 1x. Essentially, the size of the investments were equal to the size of the operating budget, 1x in 1910, to about 2.5 in 1960, so 50 years. All of a sudden, it was all flat. This is the era in which we were growing the resources on investment. And then in 1990 to 2000 was the first institute campaign, comprehensive campaign, and the dot-com. So fundamentally changed the level of investment availability at MIT. And then moving forward, we've maintained that ratio. And we're there, and why is it important? Because we can then borrow, we can do all sorts of things to really accelerate the investment in the campus. So this is kind of the final chart in financials, and it just, to me, summarizes what, for many of you, may have been like when you graduated, when you didn't graduate, you probably have a decade here that you can identify. And the transformation of the, let me call it business model, financial model of MIT has been significant. So in 1960, which is not a bar that is here, the blue bar, which contributed to research, was north of 85%. In 1945, it was 95%. And you can see that in 2017, the year we just closed, is less than 30%. And if you combine investment income and gifts, it's becoming a growing part of how we fund MIT. So this is good and bad. It's good because we can fund what we need to do. We have less restrictions. But the second one is it offers a lot of volatility and potential for financial environment situations that MIT has nothing to do with. The other good thing of the campaign, and I'm sure you've read many news, is that for the first time, and I've been a broken record, I need to represent this, is the level of unrestricted giving to MIT and the level of flexibility of how MIT is able to fund other new priorities is highly dependent on the kinds of things that are in green. And for the first time, unrestricted general crossed $1 billion. This was, you've probably heard the news, but we had great donors that really gave significant unrestricted giving to MIT, and investment results also contributed to that $1 billion. So let me move to like the challenges and start veering towards space. So we now hopefully have established that on a financial basis, we are on a solid footing. We have lots of uncertainty that is not so much driven by MIT, by the, call it geopolitical, financial markets, you name it. And all those risks are severe. But there is one risk that is MIT, and fairly uniquely MIT, and that's the risk that the campus was in a state that wasn't really commensurate to the kind of research and excellence that we deserve. So in 2009-10, we did the first study to quantify what would it take to bring those buildings that were in not the state that they should be to just the basic level. That doesn't mean that we would be bringing the new research that faculty want to do. To give you an example, if you were a mechanical engineer in 1950, today you may need a wet lab. In 1950, you didn't need a wet lab. So that doesn't take into account this number, but the number was shy of $2 billion. So we quantify this, we identify it, and I always kind of put these tests. I think for those of you who've seen this, you may know the answer. So do you remember, if you were with me a few times ago, and if you don't, do you know what this is? Any clue? Who's a civil engineer? No? Huh? So building 1, right? The home of civil engineering. This is the electrical panel in the basement of building 1. It's vintage, 1917. But the worst part, it's still the one that's there. So when somebody flips a switch in building 1, the lights of Cambridge flicker. Of course, I'm exaggerating a little bit, but you get the point, right? So we needed to get to act and to act quick. And I think that has been one of the priorities of investment. And what you see and you've experienced coming to this room, it's actually reflective of a massive investment in campus. Both in terms of priorities, like the blue sections represent key priorities, like the MIT Nano building that I'll show you a picture right in the middle of the campus. The infrastructure upgrades, like the central utility plant or the investment, the academic investment in Kendall, which I'll touch upon next. But what's important is that green part that was pretty much inexistent in 2010. So the renewal of the campus and the overall investment has tripled in just a very short period of time. And what I'm really grateful to the MIT community is that everybody understands and is together. This is not an easy thing to do. There's noise, there's dust, there's disruption, there's displacement, you name it. There's lots of calls and emails to my inbox, trust me. But we're moving forward, and we think it's a necessity for MIT to really be able to compete in the next decades. So I said first was financial and the fiscal component, and how we're addressing the priorities of investment, space, people, et cetera. So let me turn now to the environment for enabling breakthrough innovation. And I could talk a lot about the environment. I could talk about the MIT environment. I could talk about the Innovation Initiative. I could talk about the great things in the Deshpande Center, the Sandbox, and many, many others that are out there. But that's kind of not my job today. You can ask anyone during these 3 days, and they'll tell you we're doing amazing things internally. My job today is to tell you what do we do around MIT, and perhaps even within MIT, to enable kind of exponential breakthroughs in innovation. So there are 4 things I wanted to touch upon today. The first one is MIT Nano. Then I'll show you some on the Kendall Initiative and Volpe. And then the 4th one will be the engine that I'm sure you've all talked about and heard about. And I want to tell you a little bit more how it came about and what we're doing. So this is this chart. I use it for several purposes. I show it because the density factor, and I'll show you next chart, is unparalleled. The kind of proximity factor that MIT has here, and we've had the luxury to really do, is unique. And we want to exploit this uniqueness. It comes at a price. If you want to build something here, it affects you, and it's very costly. But it's really very important, because since its origin and the main group of MIT, the connectivity factor and the interdisciplinary work that goes on here is transformation. So right in that, MIT Nano, which let me see right here, it's at the place of former Building 12, right behind the dome. It's a magnificent, state-of-the-art facility for the most advanced nanotechnology clean rooms in the world. It's an investment, combined investment, 350 for the building, plus maybe 200 for the infrastructure necessary to feed the utilities of this building. So think about $500 million, north of $500 million of investment. There's no one doing that kind of investment. It's slated to be opened in the summer of 2018. So we're actively finishing it up. It's pretty much all built, and it will take about a year to just clean the air inside the building to make sure it's at the level that our researchers need. The second, and perhaps most important in terms of transformation of the environment, is the Kendall Square Initiative, which for those of you who have not been so inclined to hear about, it's south of Main Street. It's occupying the site of like what were used to be 6 surface parking lots. And then north in blue is the Volpe site, which we just got the exchange agreement with the government late last year. So let me touch on what that means for MIT. So in terms of development size, Kendall Square is around 1.3 million square feet. The Volpe, we hope, we're now in the zoning process with the city. We hope it's going to be in the 2.5 to 3 million square feet. To give you a sense of the campus today is 14 million square feet. So the whole Kendall development is about 10% of the campus. The other one would be about 20%. So talk about 30% of campus development potential in these 2 sites. So this is an image that we're now in community meetings. It's perhaps a hard image to kind of look at. It's an aerial view of what the Volpe site would be. So here, kind of right there. And the nature of this exchange agreement is that we negotiated with the government to really have access to this 14-acre site, which has an odd shape here, of which 4 acres will be devoted to rebuilding the new headquarters for the Department of Transportation that's existing in the site. And the remaining 10 acres, once we're done with that building, say 4 years from now or so, will get exchanged to MIT with its development rights. So the remainder of that It's a set of about 8 buildings, a park, and lots of amenities that really will create and start creating, again, the kind of neighborhood and Kendall system we want to foster more innovative companies, more residents, et cetera, et cetera. So most important, when you combine the Kendall, which is right there, with Volpe, we're able to think about the district and its uses on the ground floor. So for the first time, and through the Mitimco Real Estate Office in combination with the MIT administration and the facilities department, we look at creating essentially a mini city around MIT and what is needed to be around MIT to create the right richness and the desire for people to be around MIT. Not only the companies that were already successful, and I'll show you a picture of, but really the critical mass of individuals that will be here in this kind of knowledge innovation economy that we're creating and benefiting from. Kendall, this has been in the news now for a few years. Kendall is a 6-site development. As I said, there's the site number 4. That's the academic site. We're moving forward. That's kind of this building over here where the grad tower will be. That is supposed to replace Eastgate and add a number of beds, 250 beds to the Eastgate side. So a total of 450 or north of that for that. The innovation and entrepreneurship hub will be here. The admissions office will be moved right there. Campus tours will be starting from Lobby 7 and also from the Eastern Gateway at Kendall. For those of you like maybe staying at the Marriott, kind of right across the Marriott, that's location. Site number 5, which is this one, will be a site that will be commercial on top, but at the bottom we'll have the MIT Press bookstore and the MIT Museum. So we will be bringing the MIT Museum from its current location in Kendall Square to here. And you can imagine and start thinking and envisioning a gateway right here, that when somebody comes out today, comes off of the Kendall T station, it's really hard to find MIT. And a very basic goal we have of this project is that at least an MIT logo will be right there. So to give you a sense of the transformational nature, but also the length of projects like this, the beginnings of all of this started in 2010, 2009. And we got the first approval of the zoning in 2013, in April of 13. And the first building, which will be the academic building, of course, this one we are expecting to fundraise, but we're moving forward because we need to make sure that we have the beds and we want to create the gateway. This building will be opening in around summer to fall of 2020. So we're talking 11 years, if you will, of planning and discussions with the city and others to do this. We hope Volpe will be that, but that's kind of the time scale of these developments, 10 to 15, up to 20 years. But once they are done, when you think about Kendall and Volpe, they create an incredible environment in close proximity to MIT campus to not only locate very innovative companies, small, medium, and large, but also the individuals that will want to live close by. To give you a sense, number 1 is another housing development. This is a commercial housing development. So we will be creating a district right here. There will be a grocery and a pharmacy in this neighborhood. So what this entails, of course, these are nice pictures and renders from architects, but what this entails is what you probably have observed. And this is a massive construction site. For those of you who raise the hand when civil engineering and architects, it's an amazing site to watch. It's a dangerous site. That's why it's fenced. It's disrupting flows, of course, because people used to use from Kendall to the campus. Now you have to go around it. But it's really enabling us to start with all the utility work and infrastructure work, and then we'll start digging to go and build the underground parking that this complex will have. Also importantly, the 3 buildings facing Main Street, which would be this one, so familiarly called the Clock Tower, the Rebecca's building that was called lately, and then where the MIT Press bookstore, they are going to be maintained. The facades will be maintained. They are historical landmarks by the Cambridge Historical Commission, but they'll be gutted, and inside they will be leveled to make sure that we have the right complex for office and laboratories. Okay, so with this, hopefully what I want to kind of summarize today is that something I haven't talked about, but I think you know enough, is that MIT academically is doing as good as it's ever been. And anywhere you look, anywhere you go, any department you are from, any department that you like, they're doing amazing stuff. Our faculty, researchers, students are at their best. I think it's uncontested. We have any metric to prove it, but we're doing really, really well. What's less known, but I hopefully from my conversation you know, is that we're also doing pretty well around MIT. And this is something that it was many years ago, but it's now intensified and exponentially moving up. And if you look around the cluster of innovation around MIT, through its control, its land control, and through very good policies around how do we think about it, we have now an amazing roster of companies. And this is just a little bit of the ones that you may know the logos from, but there are lots of starting companies, medium companies, and big companies around MIT because of MIT. And what we're able to do here is not only extract value from the real estate holdings that MIT has for future academic expansion, but also extract even greater value intellectually by developing the right adjacencies with our community. So here we have a unique position. As I say, typically if you want to find clusters of innovation, this would not happen around a kind of a 1.5 mile radius of where you are. We can walk pretty much anywhere of these companies. One recent example that you may or may have not heard about, but it's kind of, to me, the really clear expression of the benefit of this proximity. When I talk to the city, I talk about the power of proximity. And this power of proximity enables reach, face-to-face human interactions that create connectivity, that create relationships, that ultimately create significant benefits. So the latest one that we just announced is the IBM and MIT. IBM, just let me go back for those of you who didn't see the logo. Sorry. IBM Watson right here. IBM Watson right here. So just about 2 years ago, IBM Watson Health moved its headquarters from New York City to Kendall Square to be in proximate distance to the Broad Institute, to the MIT departments, to the researchers that needed the work to be done. Google intensified its presence in Kendall Square to think about bio and health. 2 years, fast forward, what we have is the agreement signed for a $240 million investment in a new lab collaboration between IBM and MIT. This is one example, the most recent example, just a few days ago. So as I said, this environment enables breakthrough innovation. Not today, but into the future. This is a 10-year agreement, so we're moving forward. So with everything I said, you could add, well, what's not going as well? And that was when we paused and we thought about what became the engine. And what it was is in 2015, you may recall Raphael wrote an op-ed in the Washington Post about innovation orchards. And an innovation orchard was a term that we coined around creating this environment for breakthrough innovation. But it really didn't have the specifics. It's just like, well, we know that for the kind of innovation that comes out of places like MIT, the system out there is not serving it as well as it could. What I mean by that is that there are not resources, patient capital, and infrastructure necessary to do that. And since that time, in 2015, we started to work on, well, let's validate that. Let's go around and talk to people and create the stories, both within MIT and in this region. And we clearly validated that. We validated lots of things, that within MIT, there are lots of ideas, big and small and medium and large, that cannot effectively transition from the lab into what we at MIT would call impact. And the second one, and perhaps even most important for what's next, is that capital-intensive technology isn't really served by the current financial frameworks. And this is because people can really, they don't look at a 20-year investment. So you think about the Volpe investment, for which we publicized, we paid $750 million for this exchange. Clearly, this is not a developer timeframe of a 5 to 10-year investment. This is perhaps a 50-year play for MIT. So capital-intensive technology and breakthrough technology may take 20 years, may take 30 years. And that's outside the investment profile of an Uber or a Lyft or something like that. So after validating this, we kind of thought about like, how do we explain this? And how we explain this is that there's no app to cure cancer. And we kind of came up with this term to really visualize what we meant. And what we meant is that, of course, that we value the innovation that goes on around services and the digital economy. And the digitalization that we're all experiencing is making our lives much more productive and easier. But at the same time, that's not really going to change fundamentally lots of the things that we are concerned about at MIT. And that there's a gap, a very significant gap between what we do in the labs at MIT and what needs to happen to really commercialize these companies. So this engineering risk is something that even the vast VCs will recognize they are not well positioned to address. So when we talked about it, like what could MIT do to enable that this gap be either closed or at least put the investment that's really necessary to make sure that that doesn't work. So the first thing is like, why should it be MIT, right? I mean, why would MIT start something around this area? And we listed a bunch of things that we think are unique to MIT or to the Kendall ecosystem that I just presented to you that would make this effort and the investment in this effort much more successful, or at least the potential for success would be much higher. So you can read them, you can think about this, but it goes from our ability to be patient with capital, the unique density of infrastructure and tough infrastructure around within MIT and outside in the companies that I showed you, and really the talent component of like who is around MIT, and not just MIT, but MIT, the Broad, the hospitals, Harvard, you name it. So we talked about it first, if you really want to address something as big as what we've just presented, it's not just for MIT to solve. MIT can enable that, but we want others to help us and work together with us. So we wanted to look at the areas in which MIT has the greatest strengths and the kinds of technological areas. And this is a pictorial representation of areas that are, I think, you can name them, but anywhere from robotics to biology, bioengineering, the convergence of life sciences and engineering, digital, Internet of Things, although this picture is not, but clean energy, believe it or not, clean energy research. So all these areas, and you could add many more, are areas that are characterized by really like these leaps of faith in technology disruptions into commercialization and the need for tons of investment, tons of necessary resources. And to make it very, very clear, one of the pain points that we looked at was, well, what happens when a student who's working on this today graduates and not imagine that they need to replicate MIT Nano? Well, it's impossible for a startup to replicate MIT Nano, right? I mean, they couldn't. The capital efficiency and the capital investment demanded from investors is not sufficient to really be able to do that, and therefore people end up quitting. So that came about to say, well, let's do something about it, and it became the engine. It had a different code name, of course, as you can imagine, but we launched it as the engine, and the engine was this vision and aspiration to help tough tech founders around this region, in particular MIT, but really open to these regions' entrepreneurs, to be invested in this area because we believe in the power of proximity, and we wanted to have access to this network of resources. So we launched publicly the vision and the ambition in October of last year. It had great reviews, but a lot of skepticism. So, of course, if it hasn't been done, there's a reason. But if I said that and we didn't do it, it wouldn't be MIT, right? So we wanted to do something about it. We wanted to test it. And because it was MIT and because it was built by MIT, I think it got the attention. In many ways, like when MIT launched MITx and digital learning, and then we launched edX in connection with Harvard, it provided the credibility and the long-term vision. So what is this? And I'm not going to go through the full slide, but it's because it's too busy. But what it's meant to indicate is that not just within MIT. I mean, if you look at the top of this slide, there's like MIT Innovation Initiative, Sandbox, lots of programs, the Spande, VMS, you name which ones that we have, but all the others that are part of the regional network of innovation within Boston, the greater Boston area, and Massachusetts. So can we take something that gives them the funding necessary for this tough tech innovation, the kinds of input and reviews and infrastructure necessary to succeed, and be the bridge or the extension cord for them from the laboratory all the way to this commercial impact? It's a simple idea, but of course, the idea needed to be validated and funded. So it has many components. It has a space component. It has an infrastructure component. It had a fund. It had, of course, a selection criteria. And this was the first thing that we needed to cross at MIT. We're used to having lots of initiatives that are educational in nature that help out entrepreneurship and innovation, but they are accessible to all. In this one, we needed to have a filter and a criteria for passing that, and we wanted this criteria not to be done by MIT because there's lots of conflicts of interest if you do that. So we hired an independent person to run the engine who makes and is charged with doing that. The person is Katie Ray, well known in the Boston regional ecosystem. And she and her team are making the investment decisions for the companies that enter the engine. The engine fund started with an ambition to raise $150 million, and MIT committed 25 to it. I can anticipate to you, I cannot disclose the full amount, but we will be either shy or over $200 million. So there was lots of skepticism about, will we have investors believing in this mission? And we wanted investors that were aligned with what we're trying to do, not just financial return investors. And to make sure that that was the case, the fund was created in a way that instead of being an 8-year fund, it was an 18-year fund. So that we wanted to make sure that people entered into this fund because they believed in the mission. We also believed that we will get financial returns. Otherwise, we would not be creating a fund. But at the same time, we wanted to create the stability to do this. Another big part of what we think MIT could do to help out these innovators is about 70% of the people we interviewed and we surveyed, they had spent, if they did get to Series A investments, say about $10 million Series A investment, they spent about half to 70% of that, $5 to $7 million, replicating infrastructure they already had when they were at MIT or a laboratory. We were aiming at that. Because if you think about software, all the money they raise, they go to really programmers to do and at that. So we wanted to equate a little bit what's happened with Amazon Web Services and cloud services. The cost of innovation in software has dropped dramatically, and you and a friend can do that over the weekend with a laptop, and that's pretty much what you do. Well, can we get to a little bit of that paradigm? So we came up with this engine room idea, and the engine room idea was the idea to open up the infrastructure services that had already been pioneered here at MIT, within MIT by Professor Marty Culpepper, and the Mobius application for makerspaces. So can we have all the makerspaces available and visible to every student at MIT? That was his idea. So we took that idea and said, well, can we make it bolder? Can we make every piece of infrastructure and specialized equipment in the region open to the engine startups? And ultimately open to any tough tech entrepreneur. Of course, you can start with the why nots very easily, but we jumped on it. We got 10 partners very quickly, and we started with MIT and dreaming what that could do. And what that could do, and these are real partners, but not a real example, is that if somebody is creating some technology that necessitates MRI imaging, rapid prototyping and fabrication, and certain technology that only GE has, well, guess what? We have Mass General connected to MIT through the Martinez Imaging Center. We can access their facility in Charlestown. We can go to the seaport at GE headquarters, and Flex has opened a facility that will enable to scale and fabricate that device in a very quick basis. All of them have signed agreements with the engine to do this, and to do it either for free or at a price that would be a lot cheaper than a startup could access it. So again, by using the MIT platform and the engine platform, what we're trying to do is enable that access. A different example would be through MIT, we will give them access to MIT Nano facilities at a price, at a commercial price, but at a fraction of the cost that a capital investment would be required. That's the whole idea. To give you a sense, this is now completely outdated because the inbound requests to be part of the engine are now shy of 1,000. This snapshot was 200. It's just when we kind of started looking at this. The pie chart hasn't changed that much. The other idea we had is like, well, will we really be tapping the right market, or will we have 90% of people applying still for software applications? And it's not that we're not going to fund software. It may be, but most likely we will not. And these were the kinds of applications that we were having: biotech, software, medtech, energy, IoT, manufacturing, other, highly diversified, great funding teams, and great technologies. And also the other thing is like, well, will here be application and free-for-all companies that are already kind of working? And then the reality came that most of these companies were at the right stage that we wanted them. Most of them had not raised more than $100,000, and they needed a lot more to even get to proof of concept. So that was the perfect stage for what we wanted to do and wanted to bridge. So take this engine as the idea of like MIT is doing amazing work throughout, and we graduate postdocs and grad students and undergrads, and they want to do great things for the world, and they want to have their aspirations fulfilled. This is one more element that we hope they will be accessing through the MIT network. So there's no more I can say, but on September 19, stay tuned. We will be disclosing the first cohort of companies funded by the engine. They're amazing companies, and I will just tell you, they have a lot of alumni connections. So here it is: financial, physical environment, and now one of the programs that I happen to be very familiar with the engine that we're doing.